Mining is one of the top 3 industries in South America, and Chile, being a global leader in copper production, is one of the most industrialized countries on the continent. While all these countries are expanding their mining exploration, the rise in metal prices from 2001 to 2011 dramatically increased the demand for production. In that decade, revenue from mining in Latin America tripled from $90 billion in 2000 to $305 billion in 2011. With all this money flooding into the mining industry, you would expect safety measures to rise in quality too. This wasn't the case though, as in the early 2000s, even as some of the safety standards were in place, they were primarily enforced only on large operations. The biggest issues and safety hazards saw were largely in the medium and small sized mines. In Chile, for example, the National Geology and Mining Services had only 18 mine inspectors for the almost 3,500 mines that were granted permits. With such a small number of checks and balances, there was a minimal chance at ensuring safety protocols nationwide. It wasn't long before many mines in Chile began running well below standards. Having untrained and inexperienced crew with single-entry operations, safety shelters and emergency ladders were quickly the first things to be ignored. With countless owners and operators in the region not abiding by the rules, it's obvious that disaster was bound to happen. Seeing terrible accidents occur early in the year across the neighboring countries of Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, some Chilean miners went on a brief strike in the summer of 2010, fighting for better and safer working conditions. However, there were still hundreds of mines operating, and one of those was the privately owned, medium-sized San Jose mine. On the morning of Thursday, August 5th, hundreds of miners entered deep into the mine to resume pulling gold and copper out of the ground, but many did not come out. According to the first-hand account of miner Raul Villegas, at around 2 p.m. that day, he was just finishing filling up his truck with rock to be brought out of the mine when he heard a loud crack. A sound coming from within the mountain wasn't uncommon, but the dust that was quickly filling the cavern was. Raul recalls being faintly concerned, but being 600 meters below the surface, he knew there were several teams of miners deeper in the mine, and he thought that the sounds likely came from them. Driving up the ascending ramps of the mine, Raul passed Frank Lobos and Mario Gomez, who were both heading down to fetch some friends for lunch. Raul told them about how dusty it was further below, but both men continued down into the mine and disappeared into the darkness. Once closer to the surface, the huge cloud of dust suddenly and forcefully overtook Raul's truck, enveloping him in dirt. Just as his truck exited the darkness, he heard and felt what was described as a collapse, later saying, "I felt an expansive wave, like there was a dynamite explosion, and my truck's engine almost turned off." Bursting from the mine and into the glaring desert sun, as he looked back there was a massive cloud of dust streaming from the mine's opening. Reporting the collapse to his manager, it would be a few hours before they notified authorities. Raul then got a few workers together to head back into the mine to see if they could find anyone, but after descending just a few hundred meters, they found that the ramp leading deeper into the mine was no longer there. Seeing that hundreds of tons of rocks had collapsed, cutting off the ramp and destroying the mine's ventilation shafts, it stopped any progress at finding the trapped men. Authorities soon arrived on the scene and called in the region's 6-person Special Operations Emergency Squad, who arrived on the scene 7 hours after the collapse. After spending the night working in the mine, the team came out empty-handed, having made little progress in finding a way past the collapse. Relatives and reporters had also begun arriving on the site, and many were demanding answers. Handfuls of independent miners in the area also showed up with shovels and various machines, pledging to dig the trapped men out. After the Special Operations Squad failed for a second time to enter the mine, the Chilean government began to assemble its own team. It recruited the help of Codelco, the state-owned mining company. Being the largest in the nation, it has several experts in-house that specialize in rescues of this sort. 2 of their best men, engineer André Cigaret and René Aguilar, a risk management expert, were assigned to the rescue operation full-time. The Codelco-led team spent nearly a week trying to secure the mine for a final attempt at rescuing the men through the main opening. But the rocks continued collapsing and at one point sent the rescuers running from the tunnels. Geotechnical instruments also confirmed that the earth was not nearly finished moving. The team then quickly hatched a second plan. Chile being a country of miners, the team would do what they always did when it came to extracting precarious objects from deep inside the ground. They would drill. Receiving countless emails from mining and drilling companies from all around the world, the Codelco team not only had the choice of an array of specialized equipment, but they were also flooded with countless ideas of how to rescue the miners. Determining quickly that there were 9 available and capable drills within the area, the new plan was to punch 9 14-centimeter wide holes into the ground until one made contact with the miners. Referencing topography plans for the mine, it was predicted that the miners made their way to the refugee chamber 700 meters below the surface. And with that, all 9 drill rigs were set up in an arc formation, all pointing their bits towards the target, and began drilling. Some of the drills encountered problems along the way, as 2 of the drills were unable to dig deeper than 500 meters, and another one hit an unexpected cavern in the mine. Kelvin Brown, an Australian drilling expert who flew to Chile to assist, calls the chaos of having 9 drills pounding into the rock in such close proximity, saying, Everyone was trying very hard and very fast, but it was a little bit hopeless in the early days. It was just a lot of people drilling very fast. By that point, relatives of the miners had begun moving into a makeshift tent village at the entrance of the mine, called Camp Hope. As time wore on and despair deepened, the families had a standoff with the local police. Frustrated by the slow pace of the rescue and demanding to be allowed on the site, 17 days after the collapse, the rescue operation had its first breakthrough. One of the drills hit a cavernous space deep inside the mine. The drill was then turned off and lowered into the hole. A distant tapping was felt on the end of the drill as it was pulled back to the surface. Rescuers were stunned to discover 2 notes were tied to the probe. They were both written by Mario Gomez. One was addressed to his wife, and the other was written in red letters and said, "We are fine in the refuge, all 33 of us." The miners were alive, having survived on rations of tuna and milk. The question now is how they would get out. The initial drill holes, 3 of which ultimately reached the miners, a 14 centimeters wide, which is just large enough to fit an apple. Rescuers figured they needed a hole 71 meters wide to hoist the men out. Doing days of research, the team learned of past rescue operations that used drills to reach trapped miners, who then were eventually lifted out in a rescue cage. This then became the plan, and rescuers decided they would have 3 drills working 24 hours a day. The 3 drills were called Plan A, B, and C. If one failed, there would be 2 more keeping the rescue on track. Each drill used a different method of digging, as they were all different types and used for different things. The Plan A drill, mainly used for creating ventilation shafts in underground mines, is known as a raise borer, meaning it drills a pilot hole first before using a reamer to widen the opening from the far end. The drill in Plan B is used from everything from mining to geothermal energy exploration and has a roto-percussion drilling system, one that was used in previous rescue efforts. The Plan C drill used a massive drill rig from Alberta. Designed primarily for oil and gas exploration, this one had a very small chance of working. Ideally, once any of the rescue holes were drilled, the shaft was to be encased with steel pipe, thus ensuring the safest possible journey back to the surface. 3 metal rescue capsules were also manufactured by the Chilean Navy to lift the miners out. Painted in the blue, white, and red colors of the Chilean flag, the 419-kilogram capsules were dubbed the Phoenix. It was an ambitious undertaking, and there were plenty of room for mistakes in any of the 3 plans, but after days of drilling and multiple setbacks in each of the 3 plans, Camp Hope erupted in cheers as family members cried out and waved Chilean flags. On drill site B, champagne was being sprayed and hard hats tumbled off as rescue workers hugged each other, shouting for joy. Finally reaching the miners, the team's new rescue was inevitable. Still being days before the miners could be lifted out, the rescue planners now determined whether the hole would be cased with steel pipe or not. Plan B was always going to be the most difficult hole to encase, thanks to the winding trajectory, but 72 sections of steel pipe was shipped to the mine for the next step of the rescue. The tentative plan was to encase only the top 70 meters of the hole and to leave the rest as is. But when it came time to hoist the 33 men up, a medic descended into the hole first to assess their condition. The healthiest miner was pulled from the hole first, followed by the weakest, and then the rest followed. The shift leader at the time of the collapse, Foreman Luis Urza, was the very last miner to be extracted. After stepping foot on the surface, they were treated initially in a field hospital before briefly reuniting with relatives. They were then flown by helicopter to a nearby hospital, where they remained for 48 hours before being released. In the weeks and years following the tragedy, top officials with the country's mining regulatory body were fired, and dozens of small mines were shut down. Families launched lawsuits against the company as well as the government, and measures were taken to ensure this kind of accident will never happen again. Furthermore, international work safety groups started to press Chile to adopt international safety standards for mines and to execute them properly amongst all agencies.